Speaking of UFOs, this is a great segue into our theme number 2 because I've been working on my UFOs. Do you know that you all have inspired me to get my UFOs done? And I'm not kidding. I've got a lot of them. I am just like you. Okay. Just like you. Lots and lots of UFOs. And just seeing your photos that you've been posting, I'm just itching to like be at the sewing machine and get all my projects done. And I first cleaned up, I cleaned up my sewing room, my sewing space. I still have a few things I want to put on the walls and such, but I got it all cleaned. I organized my UFOs. I won't show you that closet. There's a lot of them. And, or maybe I should show you and you'll feel better, right? But some of the things that I have been trying to finish with UFOs is just doing binding on so many projects, right? And so as I was binding some things this week, I thought to myself, I don't know if I've ever done a 3 at 3 on getting your corners perfect when it comes to binding, mitered corners. So that's what I thought I would share today. This is going to be your daily how-to, is how do you get perfectly mitered corners that lay flat, right? And I agree with you, Annette. She says the binding is my favorite part. It is for me as well. I love to bind. I love it. And I can say I didn't used to. Years ago, I would hire out my binding for someone else to do. I bound by check. Some of us do quilting by check. I did binding by check. And this was, like I said, years ago. And then through trial and error, I learned things that helped make binding a lot easier for me. And so now I love to bind. It's one of my favorite things to do. I actually get to sit down, relax, do a little hand binding. Now I know Barb is all about the machine binding. I personally love to hand bind. I love it. Now, every once in a while, I will do it by machine, but I truly do love hand binding. But, oh, yay, Judy. She said, yes, please. I completely messed up the corners of my UFO last night, ripping it out as I watched today. Perfect, Judy. I hope what I can share with you today will help. Bertie said, OMG, you read my mind. Those binding corners are a pain in the rear. Mm-hmm. And so I've got some things that will hopefully help you. And, Jules wants me to share my closet. Maybe I will. Stay tuned and maybe I will share with you my closet, make you feel a lot better. So no worries. If you have a notebook, you can get out a notebook and take notes. But I know this audience now. And I know you're going to want a printable. So I got you covered. I've got a printable for all of you today. So go ahead and relax and enjoy the tutorial. And don't worry, I've got it all figured out for you with a printable. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is I'm going to show you some of my first binding projects that I ever did. This was like years ago. Okay. And the reason why I want to show you is because I want to show you that I've come a long way, right, in my binding journey. Now, I will say to you, done is better than perfect. Okay, so I don't want you to beat yourself up if you are like, oh gosh, Kris, that's what my binding looks like. That's what my bound corner looks like. It's all good. Okay. I'm just showing you the journey I've been on. Okay. So I'll show you the quilts. I actually found them in my closet, which I was really excited about because I was like, hey, I've got something I can show. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to show you, now this quilt has been around forever, and it's still quite a popular quilt. It was from the days when Buggy Barn, do you remember that? Buggy Barn had these hearts. Probably some of you might have this quilt in your stash. Maybe it's a UFO for some of you. But yeah, you're right, Lynn. We all have to start somewhere. And that is absolutely, that's why I want to show you this. Okay, I don't know how well you can tell, but this is how I bound in the very beginning. It is not mitered, as you can see. I folded it one way and then I folded it the other way. So they were like perpendicular to each other. It is not a mitered, what we would consider a mitered corner. When I hand stitched this on, I did machine stitch it on the front, but on the back, you can see, it is, I did a running stitch along there. Okay. I didn't hide it. I didn't even try to hide it. Well, maybe I tried by using black thread, but I just did this running stitch, and some stitches are a whip stitch, but it totally shows. It completely shows. Yeah. It's a good thing that this is a wall hanging, because this definitely would not hold itself up into multiple washings, right? So this was the journey of probably 20 years ago, okay, of how that started. This was can you believe this was one of the first quilts I attempted? I mean, call me crazy, but no pun intended. This is called Crazy Hearts. But yeah, it was quite the ordeal. Let's see I'll put this over here. Okay, then I remember going to a grocery store and finding a quilt magazine. I think it was All People, or not All People Quilt, American Patchwork and Quilting, okay? And they had this, and my girls were little, and I thought, I've got to make these for them. So, and this, I have to say, I think it turned out pretty cute, okay? So that's the quilt. This one, I think the binding was just a little too small. I think I had cut this at 2 inches, but let me show you the corner, right? Yeah, Karen, you're right. The view from the galloping horse. Absolutely. Okay, look at the corner. I was trying mitered binding. Ooh, oofta. Look at that. Look how rounded the edges are. It's not a sharp point. There's a lot of bulk going on in here. And you can see that, this is what happened. Hey, this side isn't too bad. I always say, if you mess up on one corner, you always have 3 more corners to try. Okay, this one, ooh, a lot of bulk. That is not flat whatsoever. And when you turn it around, you can see that it's also not very even. Okay. All right. So again, this is in my earlier years, I had made this quilt because I saw it in a magazine and I was just absolutely went nutso for it. And yeah, I think they need to redo this. They should redo this as a machine embroidery quilt, because I think that would be really, really cute. I was trying to do a satin stitch on my sewing machine, which for those of you who've tried doing that, it's not very easy, is it? It never quite looks quite as good. Okay, so that's my quilting journey of doing binding, and I hope that helps kind of give you a little bit of background, okay? All right. Thank you, Jennifer. She said the quilt I did for the girls was so cute. Yeah, I did both. Jessica and Katie both had their own. They shared a bedroom, and it was pretty fun. So, all right. So let me now take you into the journey of where I'm at now with when it comes to binding. And like I said, I absolutely love to bind. So I don't have this one with me because for those of you who were with me last week on 3 at 3, when I was in Ohio, I actually, let me see. I gave this to Jessica. There we go. Let me pull this up real quick. And I have to say the corners on this looked pretty darn good, if I do say so myself. I was teasing her. I'm like, dang, look at those corners. Don't they look phenomenal? I still to this day, I don't get it 100% of the time. There are some issues. It is what it is, right? But that was a good quilt. That was a good one. I was like, yes, I embraced my inner 4-year-old Batman suit. Yes, total confidence, right? Total confidence. So in the spirit of UFOs, here we go. Here's a UFO of mine. This was from several years back. Isn't this fun? This was a little mini quilt that I had designed, I don't know, years ago, 8 years. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years. Mary Fawns had just come out with her first fabric line. And I wanted to support her. She was a friend. And I thought, I'm going to make something. It was, had Dutch windmills on it. It had this very Dutch theme. So that's why I put this little tabletopper together. And one that had been wonderful had I finished it. Dagnabbit, why didn't I finish, right? Well, all that I really needed to finish was the binding. So guess what? We're going to finish the binding day today together. And I'm going to show you specifically, there's lots of things. I could do a whole series of classes. And those of you in the club, I've got lots of videos on binding. But today I'm going to just focus on one particular part of binding. And that is those corners. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to get perfect corners. I put on there every time, we'll say 99.9% of the time, shall we? We don't have to be absolutely 100% perfect. So let's go ahead and get started with, there are 8 steps that I want to show you. And I even made a little graphic for along the bottom so you could follow along with what I'm talking about. The first thing that I have found over the years to make really good binding all the way around and have it lie flat is to sew a basting stitch 1/8 inch around the outside of the quilt to sew all the edges flat. Okay. Now, some of you might think, why would you go to that much effort? Let me grab something real quick. Hold on. Didn't think I would do this, but let me show you. These are a couple of charity quilts that I need to finish binding. But when you don't, this is a little bit loftier batting, obviously. These are tied quilts. The church group did them, and then they asked me to bind them, and yeah, Kris has got to still do that. But what I'm going to do is I would actually cut my batting to be the same size as my front and my back. But then if I didn't stitch this down, you've got a lot of loft there in between, and it's going to be hard to wrap that binding around both sides very evenly. And so I always get into the habit of actually stitching everything down beforehand. Okay, so let me hurry in. By the way, this is how I hang up my bound projects. I put it on a hanger, put it in a bag, and it's ready to go. Okay, so I put all of my, if I have the binding strips already done, they just roll up and they go in there. So stitching it down is one of those things that will make a big difference. It just keeps all your layers all together. Now, sometimes long armors will actually do that stitching for you, but sometimes they don't. So let's see. If we take a look at this, you can just do a basting stitch, 4 inches, 4 millimeters, I should say, in length, or it just keeps all your layers all together and it lies flat. Barb says that's how she hangs her purses. Laugh out loud. Yeah, that works too. Elisa said, this is such a simple tip. Why didn't I think of that? Yeah, it makes a huge difference. It really does. It really does. Okay, so that's the first thing. So you would take your project and sew a basting stitch 1/8 of an inch around. You don't want to have it, too far into the seam. Okay, so make sure you don't have it too far into the seam because that's going to be covered. But that's the first step. All right, step number 2. Okay, sew down the raw edge of binding at a 1/4 inch seam allowance and stop a 1/4 inch from the corner. Place a pin to know when to stop if needed. All right, so let me take you over to my machine. I hope I can get this. I was hoping Mike could help me with the camera today, but he just had to go leave. So I'm going to see if I can pull this off myself. Pull it here. There we go. That's not too bad. Okay, so I am sewing it on the front first. I'm going to take it over to the back next, but let me just go ahead. I've already gone around one corner, and now I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, so I have my raw edges aligned. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to do something that's really important here in just a minute, okay? You notice I'm now getting closer. I'm getting closer to the corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a straight pin and I'm going to just stick it in a 1/4 inch from the corner. And sometimes I've done just like a marking pin, but I have actually found that a straight pin works better because it actually pokes out from the quilt and it allows me to see it. Before, when I did a straight pin, or excuse me, a marking pin, when the foot came closer, I couldn't see where the marking was. So doing it a straight pin, I'm going to come over. If you need to, you can pull out a little ruler. I bet most of you can probably wing this because where you've done a 1/4 inch so much that you know exactly where the 1/4 inch is, right? So that pin is going to stick out. Now I'm going to actually bring this computer over here so you can see that a little bit better. Okay, do you see how the pin is sticking straight out there? This pin is in my quilt. And again, it's 1/4 inch exactly from the corner. So what I'm going to do here in a minute is I'm going to keep stitching. I'm going to bring my binding out. I'm going to continue stitching and I'm going to stop at where the pin is and pull out my pin. Then the next step, and I'll bring that up on the screen here in just a minute, but I want to talk you through it. So you can expect what's going to happen next. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to stop at the pin, pull the pin out. Then with my needle in the down position, I will, and my foot up, I'm going to pivot 45 degrees. And I'm going to sew off to the corner. Okay, so again, I'm going to stop here, pivot, and sew off to the corner. Okay. So let's do that. There we go. Okay, I'm getting closer, so I'm going to slow down. I don't want to go over top of my pin. Okay, there we go. My needle is in the down position. I'm going to pull my pin out. My foot is raised, and so that way I can just pivot this to the 45. Okay, notice I'm not going all the way around. I'm just at a 45-degree angle. Let me bring that up. Here we go, number 3. There we go. So with the needle down, lift the presser foot and pivot at a 45-degree angle to sew to the corner edge. Okay, and I'm done. Now you could also do a back stitch if you wanted to, but I have found sewing it off at a 45-degree angle really helps. So I don't know, let's see, can you see that okay? I've sewn down, I've stopped at a 1/4 inch, and now I've done a pivot, okay, where I have gone off this way to the corner. All right. There we go. What this allows me to do is that I can pull this up now at a 45-degree angle, and I have something for that to rest on top of. That is what's the coolest thing about sewing it off. Like it tells me where to go. It tells me what angle to have my binding at. And I'll show you that a little bit more up close here in a minute. But again, you're sewing to a 1/4 inch, you go off at a 45-degree angle. Okay, so with that being done, now I'm going to turn it all the way around because I now need to get this down here, right? So with that being done, I'm going to, let's see if I can do this. I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to give it a finger press. Okay, I'm going to do this, give it a nice finger press. Let me bring this up. Okay, fold binding towards the top at a 45-degree angle and finger press the fold. Okay, that's what I want to do. This is, again, this is going to be what's going to help give you a really clear bound mitered corner. Okay, so I've got it there. I've given it a finger press. And now I bring it back on top of itself because I need to go down. I need to go down this. And how do I do that? Well, I have to bring it back on top of itself. And I'm going to make sure that fold is right at the top. So let me do a few things here. Okay. I'm going to bring you over to the back of my table real quick, because I want to, normally you don't have to go to all this work to do this. This is going to become second nature for you, but I want to make sure that this principle is very well understood. Okay, so let me bring this down here. I'm going to put it right here. So let's see if I can get this closer to you. Okay, so I sewed off at the 45-degree angle. Now I come back up. And if you need to check, you shouldn't have to check, but if you need to, look for the 45-degree angle line on your ruler, and you could match that up right there. Pull this over. Okay, and I know, oops, there we go. There, yep, okay. So that's a perfect 45-degree angle. Now I bring it back on top of itself. So just over top, and I make sure that the fold is lined up at the very top. Now, another little trick you can do is you could slide a ruler in here at the top, hold it up against the edge of your quilt right here. Pull this back down on top of itself, give it a finger press, and slide it out. The thing that you want to make sure of is that this top is lined up at the very top, that you don't have it going like this or like this, but that the edge is completely aligned at the top. Again, I'm going through this very methodically with you today, just so that we're all together and we're all understanding. But this is going to become so second nature, and to many of you, it may already be, but this is what's going to help get that perfect mitered corner. So you're not going to have to go through all of these steps. You know, you're not going to have to pull out the ruler. You're not going to have to figure out what the 45-degree angle is. This all will help just teach the principles, and then the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. So another thing you can do is use a pin right here. Yep, you can use a stiletto for it as well. Absolutely. Okay, so, and you guys, I'm going to also share another tip with you today that I've never shared before, and that is how to remove the excess bulk here in a minute. So hold tight for that. Okay, so now with this being done, I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance starting at the very top and going down. All right. So let's do that. Ooh, I'm going to pull this around. Sorry, taking you on a little field trip here. Okay, so I'm going to start at the very top. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to do one more corner for you so that you can be thinking about what my next steps are going to be. I want us all on the same page here. So I'll do one more corner. I won't go through it as slowly as I just did. Okay, I'm getting close to the end, so I'm going to place a little pin at a 1/4 inch from the corner so that I remember to stop. Sometimes we get going and we're so excited. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop at the pin, needle down, foot up. I will pivot this quilt and sew off at a 45-degree angle. Okay. All right, so it's sewn off at a 45-degree angle. So now I bring it on up to the top, do a finger press, and bring it down on top of itself. Okay, so let me make sure I go on to the next one. There we go. So rule number 5, or step number 5, I should say, is to bring the binding back down on itself with the fold aligned to the top edge of the quilt. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to bring it on top of itself, and I'm going to start at the very top again to sew. Okay, and I'll stop there. Oops. Okay, so that is that. Now, I'm going to grab some scissors here, and I'm going to come over. Let's see if I can come over here. By the way, yes, somebody said, is that the quilt we made you? Yes, yes, it is. I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay, so let's see if I can do this. Oh, I wish Mike didn't have to leave. Let me see if I can. Maybe I can put it on my printer here for a minute. Okay, and oops. There we go. I'm going to bring my chair over here. Okay. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Here we go. Okay, so now that that's done, the next step, oh, I already said this, is to start at the top of the fold, continue stitching with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is what we just did. So the next step is this one. Once all the corners have been done, it's time to reduce some bulk in the seam. Snip the top fold of the binding into the seam allowance, stopping at the stitch line. Whoa, Kris, what are you talking about? Let's take a look. Okay, so I've got some scissors here, and what I'm going to do, this is the next part of being able to really reduce the bulk in those seams. And that is, I'm going to, see if you can see this very well. Okay. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to, here's the top of the fold. Okay. Here's my seam allowance. I'm going to cut into that, just this little snip, just to the seam allowance. Okay, so just like that, I'm cutting into the seam allowance. Does that make sense? Someone is behind me, Lisa saying, is that Rachel? Are you over here, Rach? Okay, so again, again on the binding, I went from the edge, just a little snip. Now what I'm going to do, let me bring up the next one. Okay, this is it, folks. You're going to fold the front of the binding and the back of the quilt out of the way to reveal a small piece of binding sticking out. Cut this piece off. Okay, let's take a look. Whew. All right, I'm going to bring this forward. You know what, the light, let's come back over here. The light seemed to not be working in our favor. Oh, a hat just peeked around the corner. I think Rachel's here. Okay. All right. So once again, all I did was I snipped from the corner into the stitch line. Don't go past the stitch line, okay? Now the final step on this technique is to pull the front forward, pull the back out of the way. And what is left is this little piece. You probably, I don't know how well you can see that, but it's like a little triangle piece right there. It's poking out. That, my friends, is where you snip it. Snip. Done. And now the excess bulk has been removed. Let's do another one to go through that one more time. Say, okay, so here's my binding. I'm going to snip into the seam allowance like that. I'm going to pull the front and I'm going to pull the back to the back, okay? And there's revealed that little pesky triangle that just wants to add so much bulk. There we go. I'm going to snip it. Snip. There we go. Ta-da! And now, let's see what happens. Okay. Here we go. This one goes down. This one comes there. Yes. Very, very good. Very good. Okay. There you go. Perfect. Let's do the other one. I'm going to pull it back on top of itself. Sometimes you have to play with it a little bit, but you got this. You got this. Give it a little press here. And there you go. A perfectly mitered binding, mitered corner, I should say. Okay, so those are the steps to get it looking fabulous. All right. Then now is when I'm going to go and I'm going to hand stitch this, which I can hardly wait. So there you have it. Ta-da. Maybe I'll post a picture of this when it's all done. I can make it as my UFO, right? There you go. So that is that. What questions do we have? I hope that helped. Okay. Yay! Betty said, removing that triangle will be life-changing. I'd never seen that before. Yes, 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 yes. I can show how I end. Do we have, or do you, if you guys don't mind, a few more minutes, if you want to stick on, I can show you the best tip for ending your binding. By the way, well, let me see. I just have a few minutes. Do you guys want to see how I join the ends? I can show you real quick. All right, let's do it. Why not? Why not? Hopefully you guys will stick with me for a few more minutes. Okay, let's go ahead and I'll hurry and zip through this. Okay, so I just pivoted at the 45. Going to bring this up on top of itself at a 45-degree angle, bring it back down on top of itself, making sure the fold rests at the very top. Okay. Okay, here we go. This is how we do it. Okay, so we have two ends that need to be joined, right? Let me bring you over to the cutting area. Let's see. Ooh. Squeeze in here. There we go. Okay. Okay, so we have some space right here, right? I'm going to actually trim a little bit off. There we go, because I want it to lay nice and flat. Oh, there we go. And then I'm going to bring my other piece directly on top. Now, I got a lot of excess here. I'm going to trim some of that off. Okay. So where do we cut this extra, right? As I'm going to place this here, this goes on top, and the whole idea is that however wide this binding strip is however long you have to cut this off. So this, I always bind at 2 1/4 inches. So I need to go 2 1/4 inches beyond where these intersect, where these meet up. So I could measure 2 1/4 inches, or I can take some of my extra fabric that I had, which I already know is 2 1/4 inches, and I just simply lay it on top right there. So that, again, this is where they meet. This is where they intersect. I'm going to put this on top, and now all I'm going to do is take my scissors and trim where that is. Again, you could take a ruler, but this is a really fast, easy way to do it. And now I have exactly where I need it to go. I'm going to place my fingers in the top. I like to call them in my pockets. I bring this one up. I bring this one over. It's like smack. I kiss them next to each other. I'm going to pull out a few stitches. I know I'm not doing what I should. I should use a seam ripper, but I don't have one right here. Okay, so I'm going to pull this. I want to give lots of leeway. I want to give lots of space to work with. So I bring this up. I bring this over. They kiss each other. I will have them meet perpendicular with each other, just the way we joined our binding strips. So these are perpendicular. I sew from outside edge to outside edge, so outside corner to outside corner. And when I do that, let me see if I have a pin. Hold on. Let me grab a pin. Okay. I'm going to pretend that I have this sewn. So I'm just going to place a pin where the line would be, where my seam line would be. So when I go to my machine and I sew that, I cut off the excess. What ends up happening is this just goes right back in, folds right in, and I can sew the rest. It works beautifully. I have some more detailed videos inside the club, but yeah, this works pretty good. Up at the top, cross over, have those two kiss. So outside corner to outside corner. And when you do that, it's all going to flow right back in. Of course, this edge would be cut off. Take it back to the machine and sew right in. And it works beautifully every time. You don't need any kind of special ruler. I do love the binding, the mitered binding ruler when it comes to like 120 degree. Let me pull this over here. When it comes to 120 degree angles or 30 degree angles, anything that's really strange, like a different angle than a 90 degree is what I'll do. So anyway, so that is that. Let's see. Deidre says, I struggle with this part. Sometimes it's hard to sew in that small room. Oh, yes, you're right, Deidre. What you're talking about in that little space that you have. So if that's the case, take your seam ripper and don't pull it like I just did. But sometimes if I'm in a hurry, I go, and that's probably not the best thing to do. But take your seam ripper, undo some stitches there, and you're going to be in much better luck to be able to have some more wiggle room. Okay? So that is thing number 2. We did it. It was a little bit longer. Judy asked, is that finishing information on the printed instructions? No. Today's printed instructions are just on how to do the corners. So just on the corners. All right. You are so welcome, Kim. I'm so glad that it was helpful. All righty. What questions do we have? Let's see. Also, club members, that printable is found inside the club portal, so you don't have to go to our website to get it unless you want to and you want to get it right away. But I know that Kathy was putting it in the club portal as well. Okay. Let's see. Brenda said, I saw someone gather that quilt in between with Wonder Clips. It brought the ends closer and gave me more of my bonding to work with. It changed my world. I saw someone gather that quilt in between with Wonder Clips. Oh. Okay. I think I know what you're referring to, Brenda. Are you talking about when you bunch up the quilt between the two ends that join? They did it with Wonder Clips. If that's what you're referring to, yeah, I could see that totally working. Absolutely. Virginia, as far as the backside goes, I use a needle and thread, and I do a blind stitch, and maybe I will show that on another 3 at 3 for sure.